All right, so transliteration versus interpreting. What's the difference? Transliteration is one language to the same language, but a different form. Interpreting is one language to another language, and it can be various forms. It could be a parallel form, spoken English to spoken Spanish. When we talk about texts and writing things down, we tend to use the word translation, and that is the confusion. Transliteration is a single language process, historically done in written form, and translation is a bilingual process, historically and still to this day recognized as written form largely, but we can translate an ASL video into written English and vice versa. Okay, transliteration. What's the point? The point is to give you access. So if you're trying to learn Russian or Chinese or Korean, all of those languages have alphabets very different from the alphabet that English uses, as compared to French, Spanish, German. Those languages largely use the same letters, although Spanish has an enya, French has a cedilla, German has your umlaut. But largely you can read the letters and you'll be pretty close to getting the word right without having special access. So think of your bilingual dictionary. Transliteration is necessary when they don't write the language the way that we write our language. So I'm going to transliterate Russian, for example, from the Cyrillic alphabet into the Roman alphabet, which is what we use, and vice versa, so that a Russian who doesn't know the Roman alphabet can read English in Cyrillic letters. It's still English. It doesn't become Russian just because it's printed in Cyrillic letters. Likewise, we don't suddenly have an English word just because we put Russian into Roman characters. And so there you have it. That is transliteration. So cueing is transliteration. Cueing takes a message from a spoken form, generally, into a cued, visually accessible, perhaps spoken, perhaps not, form. The point is, it goes from a largely inaccessible, in terms of visual input, it goes from an inaccessible form to an accessible form by visual input. And therefore, we can also cue transliterate from somebody who is cueing silently, or even if they're voicing, and add voice over top of them, and transliterate their cued English into standard spoken English. And so that is a one-language process. There is no other language to it. That is actual transliteration. So why do we use that word when we're doing signing in English word order? Because people didn't do their research back in the 60s and 70s when these labels got thrown around rather loosely, and they got attached to the process of what we now know is actually literal interpreting. It is a bilingual act for me to throw ASL signs out in English word order. It may not be grammatical ASL, but it certainly isn't English anymore. Okay, so it's a bilingual thing to do what we called transliteration back in the day. What's back in the day? 2005 and earlier. We no longer certify sign language as a transliteration. I hold certification as a certified interpreter of ASL in English and a certified transliterator of ASL in English. What's the wrong label? But I can't do anything about it. I hold that certification even though I protest. So that is what the word transliteration is all about. So we've learned cueing in this course at the point that you're seeing this video, and now we're going to learn computer-assisted note-taking, which is being demonstrated as my means of giving access to this lecture. What is that? Computer-assisted note-taking is technically a form of transcription, yet another label. But in general terms, it is also transliteration. I'm moving from English to English. I'm moving from spoken English to written English, and that makes a difference because the written version of English is not a complete overlap with the spoken form. We have punctuation marks, which we can tie to performance features of English, pausing for a comma, longer pauses for a period perhaps, or a downward vocal inflection might indicate a period. Indentation, how do I indent my spoken language? So there's some differences, but largely we recognize it's the same language. And in fact, it's because of that that we know that the last thing we'll cover in this class is also transliteration, and that is going from ASL to tactile ASL for a deaf-blind person. There are subtle differences between them, but it is American Sign Language from beginning to end in the process, and therefore that's a transliteration task, not interpreting. Although, from the say somebody's speaking English, you have an interpreter at a deaf-blind meeting, putting that into ASL. You have interpreters throughout the room, repeating that message from the interpreter to their individual deaf-blind consumers. All of those people are transliterating ASL to ASL. The one person who's interpreting is the person who's taking it from English into ASL at the front of the room. Although you may have a few hearing people sneaking into the audience who aren't watching the interpreter, and they're listening to the spoken English and interpreting into tactile ASL. Sure, you can do that too. But largely, we're talking about what is it that the deaf interpreter is doing. Technically, they're transliterating from ASL to ASL. And so we're going to cover that a little bit separately at the end of this progression of topics in the course. For right now, computer-assisted note-taking. And the next lecture, we'll talk to you about that.